Alright everyone, welcome to the Week 2 Tonto's Demise recap. It was a crazy week, another one. Seems like I say that every week, but this week was especially crazy. Injuries all over the place, big time names going down, affected a lot of teams, a lot of matchups. So if you avoided the injury bug this week, congratulations. Even if you lost, I guess you can consider that a win that you made it through into week 3 without significant damage. But we will get into that as we go along here, obviously. Let's see. We start with the Rook, as always, the defending champ. Unfortunately, there's not much to talk about here, as McCoy's homeboys took down the Rook very easily, 172 to 129.65. Good scores up and down McCoy's homeboys roster, even though obviously Percy Harvin's touchdown, as most people probably know, should not have counted. He stepped out of bounds halfway through the run. Somehow they did not catch that on instant replay, even though they check all scoring plays. I don't know why. McCoy and Foster did pretty good, but you lost points for their receiving totals. Pierre Thomas, you were pretty much stuck with him in your flex because that's the only good spot, the only playable spot for him, but he only got you 6. But like I said, good scores up and down. Only 31 points from your quarterback, Tony Romo, and you still scored 172. So imagine if you had gotten a good quarterback score of maybe like 50 to 55, which is more normal, I would think, than a 31. You'd be easily pushing the 200-point barrier, which would get you a win pretty much every week. Unfortunately, I don't think Brandon Marshall's going to catch 3 touchdowns every week, and Percy Harvin's going to have a rushing touchdown every week. As for the Rook, what can you say? Deshaun Jackson went down. As I made some notes here about the Rook. You went against Phillip Rivers, which going into that game obviously seemed like a pretty good idea. Probably would not have disagreed with you, seeing as how they were playing the Seattle Seahawks defense. Although it was in San Diego, so Seattle has a tendency not to play quite as well on the road as they do at home, much like most teams. Rivers ended up scoring 55, which was 21 points higher than you got from McCown. And let's see. Deshaun Jackson went down with injury. Edelman, a good game, but not too much else. You benched Rivers, but you stuck with Antonio Gates, who got you 3 touchdowns and 35 points. And you did not stick with your St. Louis Rams defense. Maybe jumped the gun a little, picked up the Tennessee Titans defense, who had a good performance in week 1. They went out and had a miserable performance here in week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys. If you had stuck with the Rams, they would have gotten you, I think, 10 or 12 more points. You still would have lost, but crunching the numbers here, if you had stuck with Rivers and the St. Louis defense, you only would have lost by about 10 points. If Deshaun Jackson hadn't gotten hurt, maybe he would have covered that. And, well, let's see. Asiata did not do too much other than his receiving touchdown, which you only got the 6 points for the touchdown. Very little from Reggie Bush. But hindsight, obviously 2020, you did not make those moves. You changed up your roster instead of sticking to your guns, and it cost you, unfortunately. Like I said, even if you had stuck with those guys, not much you could do. You would have come close. You might have come closer to winning, but still lost. it might have been a more painful loss uh, if you had done that. So if you're gonna lose, might as well lose by 50 points instead of 5, and have to be forced to agonize over it for a while. All right, what's next? We had the Commish, New Gods, Mad Titans going up against Nick Foley and Dynamite. They both had the quarterbacks going in here on Monday night. Unfortunately for Jim, he had Foles, but he was going up. He was down about 15, 16 points going into Monday night. If the matchup had been a little bit closer, if Pierre Garcon had done a little bit more for you, or Jarrett Boykin, or even if you had known ahead of time that Alshon Jeffrey was going to play, would have been able to plug him in and get some extra points. But the matchup would have been a lot better if it had been quarterback versus quarterback. But Jimmy also had Zach Ertz going on Monday night, he ended up scoring 12.5 points. So that really, even though Foles he did end up outscoring Andrew Luck. Those having Zach Ertz in there pushed this one easily in the favor of Jimmy. Despite, a big 0 from Marquez Colston, 2 from Torrey Smith. You lost a lot of points once again from Giovanni Bernard, but those were made up for by Bobby Rainey, who had 144 rushing yards. Quiet game from Forte, which I think we expected against San Francisco, even though they ended up winning. Like I said, Brandon Marshall had 3 touchdown catches in that game. And what really pushed this one for you was the Arizona defense. Kick return touchdown, 9 points there. A couple turnovers. Pretty good score. Much better than the Denver Broncos defense did on Jim's side. Only 2 sacks. Not too much there. Wasting a 34 point effort from Jimmy Graham. 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards, 10 catches. That's the player you hope to get every week from him. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen all the time. Like I said, Garcon and Boykin didn't really do too much. But Gronk looks like he's still working his way back into football shape. Only 7 points from him. You got to remember that he's coming back from that pretty significant injury, so you can't expect him to be playing full throttle 100% here this early in the season. Hopefully for you, but not for the rest of us. He'll pick things up, get back into shape as the season rolls along, and you'll get more Jimmy Graham-like production from him somewhere down the line. But I guess I didn't even mention the score. The score ended up being 161.9 to 140.25, again in favor of Jimmy the Commish. All right, who's next? FC Bahoric went up against Possum Magic. This one was a disgrace, I could say, laughable. Not for Tree. I'm sure he was a little bit upset about everything, but like I said, the injury bug was not kind. I don't think anything. The fantasy gods in general have been very unkind to Tree's team so far this year. FC Bahoric took this one down 145.45 to 117 even. Even though, Matt Ryan put up about 70 last week, cut that in half this week, but a little bit better production from Julio Jones. More than made up for by Jordy Nelson, over 200 yards receiving, including an 80-yard touchdown. Yahoo says he got 38.9 plus the 3 for the long touchdown. It was actually 42 points. Fortunately for FC, he was well ahead going into the Monday night game, even though he had Reggie Wayne, Dwayne Allen, and Adam Vinatieri. Looks like Vinatieri was actually the highest scoring player of those three by a pretty significant margin, including a big 0, surprisingly, from Dwayne Allen. Not much from Patterson, not too much from Marshawn Lynch, but the combo of Ryan Julio and Jordy Nelson was enough to take this one down. Tree didn't really, barely cracking the 100-point barrier is not gonna get you a win pretty much ever. 117, like I said. Your running backs, your boy Noshawn Moreno. Obviously, I think he was injured was his very first carry of the game. Now it looks like he's going to be out for a month or so, dislocating his elbow. He's always been an injury-prone guy. I don't think I would ever draft him, even though he had a really good year last year. You would he's a guy I personally would always avoid. Sean Green, you got the usually expected, about 4 points. Your receivers, Fitzgerald, Allen, Benjamin, 11, 10, and 6 in that order. Not too good. Alan Hearns, plugged him in probably a week too late. He only got you 3 points. You plugged in the Detroit defense, which turned out to be a bad move. I think you had Chicago in there for a while. If you had actually stuck with them, you would have been a little bit better off. Even though they were surprisingly pretty decent in San Francisco against the 49ers. They won, at least they won the game, which was definitely, I think, a surprise for most of us. Unfortunately, only 45 points. I say only, but it's Peyton Manning. 45 points from him is not enough to carry your team to victory when the other guys get you, like I said, 11, 10, 6, 4, 3, 7, 10. That's barely putting you over 100, which more often than not you are going to lose. And the 117 is the lowest score of the week. Actually, there must have been a stat correction, because on my sheet here I got Possum at 118, so I'm gonna have to check that out. There must have been a stat correction somewhere in here, but still, that doesn't change things. In the knockout pool for week 2, unfortunately, we must say goodbye to Possum Magic with the lowest score of the week. Next, we had everyone's favorite, the Dub C Hooligans, going up against the defending second place champion. Well, not champion, but second place finisher, You My Puddin'. Dub C took this one down 176.2 to 146.8. Let's see. Okay, no stat corrections there. Aaron Rodgers, like I said, 80-yard touchdown to Jordy Nelson, got you 63 points. DeMarco Murray ran all over the Tennessee Titans, 167 yards, got you about 22, 23 points. Emmanuel Sanders putting up almost 20. Gerhardt didn't do anything. Kind of surprising that you started 2, not 1, but 2 Tennessee Titans wide receivers this week. Seemed like a pretty good matchup going up at home against the Dallas Cowboys defense. I think I actually pondered starting Jake Locker all week long, because that matchup looked potentially really, really good. Fortunately for me, I decided to switch him out on Saturday night and stick with my stud, which worked out. Definitely worked out for the better, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, Brandon Cooks comes back to earth after his very solid week 1. Only 8 points from him. Next to nothing from Toby Gerhart, which is probably going to be more common than me saying a big game from Toby Gerhart. Travis Kelce looks like he might be a pretty productive tight end here for you. A lot of points from your kicker. And the Houston defense has actually been doing pretty well these first 2 weeks. I don't think you used them last week because they looked, their offense looks like a mess, and you think they're going to get into games where they're going to be behind. But they've actually, these first couple of weeks, have looked pretty strong. We'll see if they can maintain that throughout the season. But as we know from last year, they definitely have the potential to fall into a losing streak, especially when you consider their weakness at the quarterback position. Anyway, as for Jeff, good game, 50 points from Jay Cutler. Unfortunately, AJ Green, his stud wide receiver, went down very early in the game with, I believe they said, a turf toe. He's going to be out for a couple weeks. That's a nagging injury that could last throughout most of the season. Hopefully not for your sake, but I know they said AJ Green was battling a foot problem all week. And I guess that must have been it. And he went out, tried to play on it, and it just wasn't working. So unfortunately, you got 0 from him. Michael Floyd was definitely affected by the lack of Carson Palmer in this game. He only had 1 catch for 20 yards. Which, let's see. You also had Andre Ellington, who benefited most likely from that. Unfortunately, no touchdowns, but 91 yards rushing, pretty good. And as I mentioned before, you got 3 San Francisco 49ers in your starting lineup: Crabtree, Gore, and Vernon Davis. Unfortunately, you're probably only going to get a big game from one of those guys, definitely not 3 of them. And this week, Crabtree was the guy, even though Gore, 63 yards and a touchdown. You'll take that from your running back position. But quiet one for Vernon Davis, and it can't be a good situation when you're flexing Dennis Pitta. Only 6 points from him. Your kicker was actually the 3rd highest scoring player on your team behind Jay Cutler and Michael Crabtree. Packers defense didn't do too much, but they didn't. They still won the game, got you a couple points. Could have been better. Let's see. You benched Victor Cruz. That's debatable, but might want to stuck with him since I'm wearing his T-shirt, and he didn't have. If Michael Floyd didn't have Carson Palmer, you might want to have stuck with Cruz, but you didn't. Let's see. Kiwi Robinson actually might be he might be a good play. Talking about Tree's team and how all this stuff that happened, I didn't even mention that he had Mark Ingram and Ahmad Bradshaw on his bench, who both did surprisingly good. Unfortunately, Ingram also hurt. He's going to be out for a month. So Tree's just really in a tough spot. I'm sorry to come back to him here on this talking about this matchup, but so far it looks like Tree might be vying for the double shot at next year's draft. He might end up having to wear the Phillip Rivers jersey and the Cleveland Browns pin, but we'll see. It's too early to speculate on such things. Anyway, let's see. Next we had the Detonators going up against the Twerkin Bowl Cuts, And Detonators took this one 158.95 to 125.3. Not any huge games from the Detonators. Up and down, I see 40, 13, 12, 16, 14, 16, 19. Solid, not great, but that's enough to get you the win here, which actually moves surprising everyone except for Brian probably. Moves him to 2-0 and in third place. Usually at this point in the season, it's more like 0-2. So will Brian be able to maintain and finally at least crack into the playoffs? We'll see. Again, too early to speculate on such things, but 44 points from Drew Brees, which is kind of quiet from him. Your receivers, they did pretty good. Excuse me. Good, not great numbers up and down. But fortunately for you, it was definitely enough to take down Twerk and Bowl Cuts. Only he had to bench. Obviously, he benched Adrian Peterson because he was deactivated. Could not use him, which might have been better off anyway because the Patriots pretty much went out and dominated that game. Greg Jennings, you had to plug him in. 1 catch, only 32 points from Andy Dalton. Let's see. Monty Ball, Jonathan Stewart, pretty decent, but not great. Unfortunately, Julius Thomas isn't going to catch 3 touchdowns every week. And while CJ Spiller did pretty good, he had that kick return touchdown for you. But most notably, I would have to say, is the Seattle Seahawks defense. I still think there's really no doubt that they're the best all-around defense in the league, even though they went out and did pretty poorly against the San Diego Chargers in San Diego. But Yahoo has it correct. Went back and checked. 1 point. 1 point from the Seattle Seahawks defense. If that happens again anytime soon, I will be quite surprised. So you only lost by, let's see, well, I want to say only, but you lost by 33 points. Could have gotten some better scores from your guys. Said 1 point from your defense, only 32 points from your quarterback. Those are basically the two guys those are the two positions that usually you need to come through and carry your team. If you can get 50 to 55 points from your quarterback, 20 to 25 points from your defense, you're already pushing 75, 80 points. Makes it a lot easier to get a good score, get a win, but unfortunately wasn't happening for you this week. But there's always next week, and better luck to you. Let's see, that's pretty much everyone. Obviously, save the best for last. From the podcast, the matchup of the week was the Springfield Isotopes going up against the newly named Huber Slayers, which I still could make a case to argue that the Springfield Isotopes are actually the Huber Slayers, since definitely 1 year on the way to a championship, the Isotopes knocked both of them out along the way. I believe knocking Jimmy during the semifinals and taking down Jay in the finals a couple years ago, but guess what? The Isotopes have lost their throne because we lost to a Huber brother last week. Anyway, this one was taken down by the Huber Slayers 175.65 to 160.05. Even though only 26 points from Tom Brady, only 14 from Calvin Johnson. So from there, between quarterbacks and receivers, the Isotopes definitely dominated. Stephen Ridley kept pace with Alfred Morris, but it was the pickup of Niles Paul, which definitely swung this one in favor of the Huber Slayers. Very maddening for me to watch the box score. I guess I know once RG3 went down and Kirk Cousins went in, and the backup quarterback throwing to backup tight end. They must get a lot of practice reps together because pretty much once Kirk Cousins went in, every single pass was going Niles Paul's way, and just kept ticking him up. He ended up with 8 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, driving me nuts that would happen. The guy you would randomly pick up off the waiver wire and plug in gets you 24 points, and but this one was close. I think I actually might have been ahead, or just very narrowly behind, with Jamal Charles left to go for me, and the San Francisco defense left to go for Detling. San Francisco ended up only getting about 12, 13 points, I think, surprisingly, which would have been good enough to get me a win. But as we know, Jamal Charles very quickly in the first quarter of his game went down with a sprained ankle, and Niall Davis came in, scored almost 28, almost 30 points by himself, which in a margin of victory by 15 points here. If Jamal Charles had been in, I'm pretty sure he would have at least covered that extra 15 points. So, extremely, extremely frustrating week for me. I'm sure I'm not going to go on and on about it because I very much doubt that I'm the only one who had a very frustrating week this week. So 2 narrow losses for me, coming down to the wire in week 1. Jamal Charles, second pick of the draft. In 2 weeks, Jamal Charles has combined to score me, I think, a grand total of 9 points. Any sort of decent production from him these past 2 weeks, and I could very easily be 2-0 and not 0-2. But that's the way it goes. But I do want to thank Brian Detling for making fun of me for drafting Niall Davis, saying I reached for him in the draft. I believe they also said, one of them said that watch, Jamal Charles is going to go down and Niall Davis is going to come in, and then Craig will be saying, oh, I told you so. But looks like that prediction has come to fruition, unfortunately, at least for a few weeks here. Hopefully, at least I have Niall Davis, so I can make a play here, try to get cover some points, get some wins here until Jamal Charles comes back. At least there's no mad scramble for Niall Davis on the waiver wire. I don't have to worry about that. So, fortunately, I was wise enough to draft him, and make fun of me if you want, but I'll be using him, and I need him anyway. So that's it for week 2. Going into week 3 here already. Let's see. So we got 4 teams at 2-0, 4 teams at 1-1, and 4 teams at 0-2. Still early in the season. Anything can change. Even like I said, the Isotopes here, I'm at 0-2. I think I started 0-3 last year and ended up making a push for a bye week by the end of the season, getting into the playoffs. So you can't be too worried yet if you're 0-2. There's still plenty of time to go. It's a long season, especially if you look at all the injuries that happened this week. From one week to another, things can definitely change significantly. The standings can shuffle. You just gotta keep fighting, working your way towards climbing the ladder if you're at the bottom. But if you're at the top, you want to try and stay there. So that's enough of my rambling. It was an interesting week, fun week, hopefully, but a painful week for some of us. But it's in the books, and we move on to week 3. So good luck to everyone in this coming week. But mostly, I'm going to have to say good luck once again to me, the Springfield Isotopes. All right, see you guys next week.